One time, my aunt used to drive an old, well, she's always drove big long cars, and she had one that the power steering didn't work on. And she was gonna park in front of the old Piggly Wiggly Enterprise, and she just barely could angle it across two parking places and get in there. And she's unflappable, you know what I mean? You know, no matter what anybody says to her, she don't let it get to her. So she parks her car, and there's some guy sitting out there waiting to pull in, and he told her, whenever she got out of her car, he says, "Why didn't you just take 3 parking places while you're at it?" She goes, "No, I think those 2 I have will do me just fine." Well, see, she was mad because it was all she could do, like you, fighting the power steering, you know. And anyway, recirculating ball. I drew a ticket with recirculating ball steering, and there was a time in here when I used to have everybody take these. That's like on the Bronco or the Crown Victoria, the parallelogram steering. The steering gear has got little ball bearings that circulate around with a ball nut, and that's how the steering actually works back and forth. And it kind of looks like that on the inside, but inside here is these recirculating balls. And I drew a job on a Mustang, probably I don't know, maybe a 71 or 72 Mustang back when I was working at Lincoln Mercury back in the 80s. And I took that recirculating ball steering thing apart to reseal it. And for some reason or another, I can't remember, when I put it back together, I never could get it adjusted so the spool valve would work right, and when you crank the car up, it would turn all the way to the right really hard. I fought with that thing a half a day, trying to get it adjusted, you know. And I don't know if it didn't have the training or whatever, you know, I never had to do a class on rebuilding and things, but I'd never had that problem before. You know, before I did that one, I'd resealed a lot of power steering units, but that one would never work out. So we got one from a salvage yard, everybody was happy. But anyway, I used to have students in here take one of those apart and put it back together. And that was not really any purpose in that, because you can buy a steering box at the parts store for not very much money. When this steering box gets wore out, you can adjust it and adjust the play on it, but you can get to the point to where it's basically, if you adjust the play too far, it'll be tight in the middle and all that, and so it's a peculiar thing. All right, so got rack and pinion steering here, lighter, simpler, doesn't have as much to it, and you're eliminating a whole host of front end parts when you got rack and pinion. You know, you've still got tie rod ends, inner and outer. Because the inner tie rod end is the one that screws on the end of the rack, but you don't have the center link, you ain't got an idler arm, you don't have a pitman arm. There's all kinds of stuff you don't have when you got rack and pinion steering, and it's real positive the way it goes. Now they don't have this, in the real world, the rack and pinion steering is not a perfect rack like that with the teeth are angled, and the angle changes as you get closer to the end of the rack, so that the wheels don't turn faster as you get closer to the end. It makes sense? I mean, you want it to be turning, when you're turning the wheel, you want the wheels to be turning the same speed all the way from one end to the other, and they have to build the rack to make that happen. All right, so your hydraulic pressure is needed to give you the power you need. This is a vane pump, and they come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and they're usually pulley driven. They either have a built-on reservoir or a remote reservoir, and a remote reservoir's got a built-in screen most people don't know about. More about that a little bit later. There's always a relief valve right there. We've actually got a kit where we can check the pressure in a power steering system. I'm probably going to throw you guys a worksheet on that before the end of the term. All right, so power steering systems have a pressure line and a return line, or maybe a cooler or a long line and a loop. Somebody, you I think, were asking me the other day, why does this power steering line just make a long, remember that? And it's to cool it. So the power steering fluid, because you're putting it under pressure, has a tendency to get kind of warm, you know? And it's constantly circulating. Now the brake fluid is not the same thing like power steering, because brake fluid you're pushing and it's going back and forth. The power steering is making a full loop, typically, on that. You know, of course you got a flow control valve and a power steering pump and all that. That's not illustrated here. But anyway, the flow control valve is right there. Whenever you pull, this is where the line goes on the power steering pump. When you pull that nut out that the line screws onto, you'll see the flow control valve down here. And it's basically pretty important. And that, every now and then you'll see a pump on a vehicle where the pump is just spinning just fine. There's plenty of oil in it. That may be what's going on with yours. It's got plenty of oil in it, but it's not pumping anymore. Doesn't make noise. You just ain't got no power steering. You got to put a power steering pump on it to make that happen. Eventually, that's what's going to happen with Jennifer's car. And when she gets in the car the first time, when she gets ready to drive, she's going, woo, because the wheels are going.
I would like to get one and put it on there.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
you can do that. The flow control valve acts like a pressure relief device that makes the fluid pressure more or less constant regardless of pump speed. You notice how the power steering pump's got a great big pulley on it? Why do they have a great big pulley on the power steering pump and a little bitty pulley on the alternator? Anybody ever think about that? Why do they have a great big pulley on the air conditioner compressor? Because you need more power. If you want more power, you're going to have a bigger pulley with more belt contact, right? What happens with the alternator? It spins faster, doesn't it? It doesn't need quite as much power. However, when the belt's a little bit looser, it's spinning to slip. When you first start the car and the alternator's having a full field and all that to get everything up, it's going to squeal. The belt just raises the chain. All right, so when any kind of power assist, whether it's brake, steering, whatever, the control part has to know when the power assist is necessary. And in the case of steering, it needs to know which way you're turning the wheel, so it needs to know which way to help you. Understand? I mean, you don't think about that, you just turn the wheels and drive, don't you? All right, so this right here, there's a little rotary valve in there in the steering column, and that tells it which way you want to turn. I mean, that's been that way on tractors and all that. If you ever look under a car and you're looking at the power steering, this boot, if you see that boot wet with fluid like that, that steering rack needs to be replaced or resealed. But I don't know if anybody reseals power steering racks in the shop anymore. We used to do it a long time ago. But you replace that whole rack if you see that thing leaking. It should not have any oil in that boot at all. If there's oil in that boot, the seals in the rack are leaking and it's got to be done away with. Here's what you may see at some point. Somebody may say, I keep adding power steering fluid. I don't know where it's going. I'm not seeing it leaking on the ground, but I keep having to pour power steering fluid in it. And when you get under there, you may see this thing swell up like a balloon. And that doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen sometimes. And it's very memorable when you see it. Power steering pressure lines will leak too. And you can turn the wheel and see the leak get a lot worse really fast. So if you've got a power steering leak, you get under there and with your safety glasses on and watch, and you say, okay, turn the wheel hard to the right, you'll see fluid squirting out if the line's what the problem is, okay? Some of them, the lines have got a joint. Lines are gonna have to be, they're stiff on one end and the other end, and they got a hose in the middle. Why? Because the engine does it, right? And you gotta be able, the hose is gotta be able to move. Well, over time, you know, a lot of times these power steering lines start to leak. Anyway, the power steering pump seals can leak too, and sometimes they do. See that little leak coming from under the seal of that on that power steering pump. Use power steering fluid when you're possible. When you're in a bind, if you're in find yourself where you have to, you can put some ATF in there and typically it'll be okay. That's what we used for years. The power steering fluid is what I like to use as a rule. Stubborn leaks you can locate with dye and a black light. Pour a little dye in there. See that dye lights up with your black light, you can see where it's coming from. Really useful for doing that. Now the power steering lines have distinctly metal tubes on both ends. The return line is going to have a hose with clamps. You see that? Now you see those lines down there where the nut is. You got to. You remember who was that used the extension in the crowfoot the other day? Power steering pump. You put that power. You did that power steering pump job. And the fluid travels through high pressure rubber hose en route for flexibility. But a lot of the times those things are kind of tough to get to. But you got to be tougher than they are. You know what I mean? Hello, parts lady.
New one's there.
Thank you very much. You brought the new alternator and left the old one. Or brought the new one and left with the old one. All right, the flare nut wrenches and crowfoot attachments are needed to power steering lines are being replaced. You know, the reason you're using that is because those are not quite as solid as a regular nut or a bolt head, and you can egg shape or strip one off really easy. Now what's really annoying is whenever somebody has already rounded it off and then they want the instructor to come and work a miracle and get something out of there, you know. You ever seen something like that? Well, Dakota had to help that guy with these screws in his door panel. He had these just rounded that one slam out. There was nothing left of that Phillips head in there, nothing but a round little crater. And so he had to drill that out. And basically we drilled the screws out and then we sent the truck back and said, now you can get your door panel off. So then we used to working on this stuff, you know. All right, now these little nylon rings right here on these Ford power steering lines, are really tough and they're really hard, that line, that goes right here. And you can buy the replacement from the parts store. From here to here, it's kind of annoying. And a lot of times when you screw that line out of there, just be prepared to have to replace that seal, because you just about got to replace that old hardened alloy seal about every time you pull that line off on these Ford vehicles. And you got to sort of thread that thing over those threads and work it into place. It doesn't stretch like a O-ring, and it's a little. You got to work it with your thumbnails and all that. You can get it on there. It's kind of a pain. Now this power steering. There's an SC300 car that came in here one day, the Lexus, like a 93 model. I wrote about it, Motor Age. But this thing had to have a power steering line, and I says, okay, it's got to have a power steering line. So I called Sam, and Sam says the power steering line from that thing has to come from Lexus, and it's $450 for a power steering pressure line for this car. And I said, really? He said, yeah, but we can actually rebuild power steering lines up here. What they do is they cut the crooked tubes off and they put new hose on it with a ferrule, you know, and they got some stuff made for that. And so Sam gets the thing over there and he cuts the tubes off of it. But he realizes his ferrules won't fit because the tube, thanks Lexus, is 11 millimeter and the ferrule is 10 millimeter. And so Sam, get this now, Sam's not here now, he's going on to somewhere else, and he's working somewhere else. Anyway, he tries to grind it off on the grinder so his ferrule will fit on there. That's going to be football shaped and everything else. Ain't no way it's going to seal. So I told Sam to quit worrying with that and send me the piece of line that you're going to, with the ferrules on the end, you know, the old, like on the copper tubing line we did the other day. And I took that and I cut off where he had screwed it up on the grinder, and I crocus clothed it down to 10 millimeter on both ends and built the guy a line for like $10. You know what I mean? But not only was the line not available, when he tried to make the line, he couldn't make the line because it was a different size. You know, you just got to think quick. It was thick enough metal to where you could crocus cloth it down. And anyway, that was a bear. But see, there's your little ferrule set up. You know, they're not showing you the little piece that goes on the line. But what they do is they cut this part of the line off and just put fresh hose on there. That's what they do. All right. The pulley on this, not all power steering pumps requires a special puller. There is the one on that little Mazda 626 that we had in here doesn't come off this way. It's actually made in there, so you got to take the pump apart to get the pulley off. But most all of them come off with a puller like that. You get a little kit like this. You can buy a little kit like that for about $20 on Amazon. So if you're serious about this and you want to gather you some tools, you probably ought to get you one or two of them kits. You know, because as you use them, you know how many kits we got in here. The parts are all busted up and missing in the, very one thing. But I'm going to tell you something else about these power steering pump lines. On these parts that come from China, with all due respect to China, we got you were involved with this one, the power steering pump that we put on the Ford 500. You remember that? You remember we were trying to use the tools to press that pulley on there. That pulley was so tight that it popped the bolt off of the tool. And so what we wound up having to do was, in that particular case, we put that little pump, it's a little hard pump, looks like a brick, you know. We put it over there in the press and we pressed it the rest of the way on there. Ain't nobody gonna get it off there again, ever. You just gonna about have a pump. That was bare. But my friend Donnie says he buys these power steering pulleys. Occasionally you replace just the power steering pulley because the one that was only broke. And it's not quite the right size. Because you start trying to push it on there, it won't go. It's real close to right, but the tolerance is a little tolerance stack up issue going on. And he's basically has to take a doggone, hone to do that. And, all right, so you can buy a decent one for less than $20 on Amazon. Okay. Now, if you don't put grease on those threads, it's going to weld itself together. Okay, that's what the deal is, and I've actually seen that where people were working really, really hard with one of these, and the threads will, the two parts of the pump will be one piece. All right. Now, a lot of today's pulleys are made out of plastic with metal hubs. You might notice the one that presses it back on there has got a thrust bearing built into it, and that thing's got to be pushed back on so that the shaft is flush with the end of that, or that belt won't be lined up right, and you'll chew your belt up. So be careful about that. So, you can have a chirp caused by a pulley misalignment. You know how that's supposed to be nice and flush? They actually have a laser that you can use to put on one pulley that if it's shooting the other one, you know it's lined up properly. You know, I had never had one of those, but I know they're really handy. All right, the types of pulley misalignment can be parallel, out of line, angular, or run out, where it's bouncing like that. If it's pressed on too far, not enough, damage, so on and so forth. That's a courtesy of gate. Remember the screen, you know, we checked the screen in hers because I was wondering if that screen was clogged up. Now the problem with a screen being clogged up, if you leave it clogged up too long and the pump runs dry long enough, it'll destroy the pump. So if you got a noisy pump and you got a remote reservoir like that, get that oil out of that reservoir, look down in there at that screen and see if that screen's clogged up with crud, because if it is, that'll be why you ain't got no power steering. And if you just keep driving it like that, you'll destroy the pump. I think that's what's happened to her. Of course, sometimes the pump fails for other reasons, but either the pump will be replaced without the screen being clean, or it'll be destroyed from fluid starvation. You know, be careful about that. Still got power steering, pump noise, what noise you made in the pump. If you've got noise, you clean the screen, even if your power steering comes back, if it's noisy, you know. Now you can actually, get to that in a minute, started to say, just turning the wheel back and forth will lock the lock with the wheels raised off the floor, will bleed the air from the system. If you're going to do that, it's best to do it with the wheels raised off the floor so you're not putting stress on the front end parts. Okay, you got that? Well, that doesn't work, there's a procedure that does. Turning the wheel back and forth. Good now. This first.
I'm taking care of this noise. All we need to do is use this special tool
to try to evacuate the air.
our steering cap off. And this plug right here is like for an old 350. It just so happens that it fits in there really good. You can kind of work it down in the hole, get it in place. There you go. Now we got a good solid connection there that won't let any air in, as long as we're putting a vacuum on this clear line right there. We're going to actually force the air to come out of it and go somewhere else.
Yeah, this is a vacuum line. I got the little isolation bottle there. What that does is it brings the air that's trapped down in there up out of the fluid. Now this is a General Motors procedure. They do the technical service bulletin on it.
This keeps the transmission flow from going into the engine. The GM procedure for this calls.
Anyway, the point is, here's the thing. We had a Cadillac in here a while back. I don't know if you were involved with that one or not, but it was noisy, noisy, noisy. And after we did this procedure, it was noisy while we were doing it, but when we took the stool off of it, it was just so quiet. We couldn't even tell there was ever any, you know, couldn't hear nothing. Really cool. Whining noises aren't always a power steering pump. Sometimes something as simple as a belt can cause noises. Now, the company that makes the belts that look like this one have just about quit making these. You may occasionally see one, but if you ever see a belt, this is a brand new belt. See how shiny it is and polished with these flutes across it? That will make a noise and go, and you'd swear it was a power steering pump or a bad bearing or something like that. And when Snap was working over there at that one place, he called me about one that he was fighting with a noise like that on, couldn't figure it out. I said, what's a belt look like? Is it shiny and fluted like this right here? He said, yeah, that's exactly what it was like. You put a belt on it and it'll go away. And so he put a regular Gates belt on it that had a, if you use a fluffy belt or, the Gates belt is not polished and shiny like that. First time we ever ran into that, I found that was when a student came back and he was beating his head against the wall trying to figure out where this noise was coming from. But one of the first things he had done when he changed his alternator, he put a new belt on it, then he picked up his noise. So be careful about that. The driver's side front tire on a car is wearing along the outside edge. The most likely cause is what? Huh?
A or C?
What do you think?
It's a guess.
You know these? What's the most likely? Think about this, y'all. If the tire is leaning out, what is that? Camber. Remember, toes like this, camber's like that, and caster is the steering axis doing this, right? You got it? So that's going to be camber, isn't it? Don't get burned by that. Which of the following would not cause radial runout? Radial runout's when the tire is bouncing up and down like that. Could it be off-center wheel lug bolts, out-of-round wheel hub, dynamic wheel imbalance, or variations in tire sidewall stiffness? Off-center wheel lug bolts. That's possible, isn't it? Could it make it go up and down? Out-of-round wheel hub? Well, yes and no, but dynamic wheel imbalance, you ever seen one driving down the road? You ever seen a tire bouncing on somebody's car up and down when you're driving that way? You just watch it and see that thing jumping? This is the least likely thing to cause that, I'm thinking, okay? Variations in tire sidewall stiffness is the least likely answer there. Before removing the steering column on an airbag system, the technician A wants to straighten the steering linkage and wheels before removing the column. Technician B just removes the column without worrying about wheel or linkage position. Who's correct about that? You should straighten the wheel or you could wind up with an airbag. One of my students years ago, back in 2008, had a Honda car. He gonna put a steering rack on there. Paid no attention to where his steering wheel was. He put the thing on there, and whenever he turned the wheel, the clock spring went all the way to the end and it ripped it apart. And on that Honda car of his, the clock spring is $450 or something. It was really high, about the same as the power steering motor. I mean, he knew better than that. He just didn't think about it. You know what I mean? We'd already talked about it, but he didn't internalize it. He's working on his own car. All right, when rotating directional tires, you know what directional tire is? The ones that have got to be put on there the right way so they're pulling, like a tractor tire. You know how if you put a tractor tire on backwards, it spins down. I mean, it'll just spin. So basically, the cleats have got to be pointing the way it's pulling, right? And some tires are made like this. So what do? You cross them to the front, move the front wheel straight back? Heck no. That's going to put some of the tires on there backwards, isn't it? If they're directional tires. Cross the front wheels to the rear and cross the rear wheels to the front. Move the front wheel straight back and the rear wheel straight forward. You don't cross nothing. The only one that's right is the one where you do that. Now, on the ones that are like the Chrysler Crossfire or the DeLorean that has bigger tires in the back than they do in the front, you just got to go side to side, but those aren't typically directional. The lift in a vehicle with an airbag suspension, technician A says it's important to discharge the air from the air spring. Technician B thinks you should just disable the system. If you're ever, and you got to know this, if you just go in here without paying attention to what's on the car, like if it's a Crown Victoria or a Lincoln or any of these vehicles that some expeditions have got airbag suspension in the rear, you're supposed to find a little switch and turn off the airbag suspension. We raise the car up. What does the axle do? It drops, right? When the axle drops, if the airbag suspension is still activated, it's going to think, oh my goodness, the car is sitting too high. I need to let all the air out of the airbags. And then when you set it down, the vehicle squats down and you can't get the lift out from under it. And the mechanics in the other service bays are going, whoa! It makes you look down right silly. So, but if you wait a little bit, it'll raise back up like that Lincoln we had in here that Timothy's got, what you got to do is you got to disable the airbag suspension. It's in the trunk on the left side, usually on a Crown Victoria or Lincoln, and it'll be under the right side of the dash, right by the passenger's right foot on something like an Expedition. You just got to find out where it is, and because I think some Explorers have got that. So be careful to make sure that you're not really causing massive damage or anything, but there's not any point in being silly. Turn it off. Air suspension light will come on. You got to remember to turn it back on when you're done. And we'll have another presentation later on about air suspension because I got to lose All right, anybody got any questions or comments? All right then. We turn off the media projector.